All right, welcome back, Vikings fans. I'm your host, Kyle McQueen. Today, we got a little positivity podcast for you. I'm going to give you 12 reasons to remain optimistic about the Minnesota Vikings moving forward. And I'm going to start with something, it's probably the least sexy thing on this list, but it's something that's popped out to me watching the games the first couple weeks, and that is Jordan Mason in pass protection has been a revelation. It pops off the screen at least once or twice in these first couple games. Just watching the game live, like not even going back and rewatching, watching tape, watching the all 22, watching the game live when the emotions are high and your only focus as a fan is whether you cover the team or not. Your only focus is rooting for your team, wanting to see your team do well. And at least a few times here in the first couple weeks, live in game action as the plays unfolding, my eyes have been drawn to Jordan Mason with just beautiful blitz pickups. So this is something I do think, unfortunately, unfortunately in a human sense, this will probably be CJ Ham's last year with the Vikings. They're not a huge fullback team, but he's their most reliable back in terms of blitz pickup. And with what Jordan Mason is putting on tape right now, I feel like they're going to go into next season and say, you know what? We just don't use the fullback enough to warrant keeping him on the roster. But we'll deal with that when we get to it. But Jordan Mason, a lot has been made of just how nasty of a runner he is, and why are we not running him more? Why is he not playing on the first couple series? We all love Aaron Jones, but I feel like we've seen enough from Jordan Mason. He was really the engine that got things purring in that first game, got things going, helped kind of get some momentum, get some rhythm going so JJ can feel more comfortable in that Bears game. We've all been sort of sitting here saying, like, why are we not handing the ball to Jordan Mason? We got first and goal from the 2-yard line. Why are we getting cute and doing play action? Just give the ball to Jordan Mason. That's why you brought him in. That's why you brought Will Fries in. That's why you brought Ryan Kelly in. That's why you drafted Donovan Jackson, so we could pound the rock inside the 5, because we haven't been able to do that in years now. But Jordan Mason, his pass protection has just been sublime. Just watching him pick up some of these blitzes has been tremendous. So that to me it's a very unsung silver lining here. But if you're a football sicko like me, which I assume you are if you're listening to this podcast or watching on YouTube, it's a beautiful thing to see. So at this rate, at the state of the offense through 2 weeks, you got to cling to anything you can. And Jordan Mason in pass protection has been tremendous. Number two, the defensive front has been incredibly active, and this comes down to the two big free agency additions, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen. I know Jonathan Allen hasn't gotten on the board with a sack just yet, but he's been incredibly active. Javon Hargrave is everywhere. When those two guys aren't on the field, Jalen Redmond has shown up his strength, just grabbing guys and throwing them on the ground. Levi Drake Rodriguez has been active. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins has mixed in maybe more than we would expect for a day 3 rookie in a Brian Flores defense. The front, at least in pass rushing, has lived up to the hype. And I don't want to read too much into the quote unquote poor run defense thus far. It's 2 games. I thought they did, other than there was a couple nice runs with DeAndre Swift in that Bears game when the game sort of felt like it was on the cusp of sort of getting out of hand, and Swift started running hard, ran through a couple tackles. But beyond that, they did a very nice job. Caleb scrambling around, that's a whole different story. That's, you're playing a pass play, things break down, he's scrambling around, he's moving around. And then, Bijan Robinson is Bijan Robinson. they're airing clips of Saquon Barkley, who just set a record for the most scrimmage yards in a season, including playoffs. And Saquon is sitting here saying, like, this guy can do things that I can't even do. So I wouldn't read too much into that. Also, they ran the ball 39 times. 39 times. Like, you're gonna rack up a bunch of yards if you run the ball 39 times in a single game. I don't think anyone's having a rough day or a bad day running the ball. And it's like, we're just gonna run it and keep running it and keep running it and keep running it. Like, I don't want to say it's a concern. It's something to keep your eye on. Losing Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Bullard, who are not necessarily guys to write home about. They're not household names, but as putrid as the interior pass rush has been, still, even now, even after that Bijan Robinson game, I'm still willing to make the trade off to bring in those two guys and what they've shown rushing the passer from the interior. Jonathan Grenard, he's only got the one sack so far, but it's 2 games. It's 2 games. He was everywhere against the Bears, and Caleb is Caleb. For whatever reason, it reminds me in a much different way, but it reminds me of Jay Cutler, where against everybody else, Jay Cutler, kind of a buffoon, kind of just slinging it around. In many ways, the original Carson Wentz, the original Sam Howell, some of these guys where it's like Nick Mullins, where they're going to put up some numbers, but they're also going to make a bunch of mistakes. And then he would play the Vikings and he would turn into Joe Montana. I don't know what it is. And it's the same thing with Caleb. Last year as a rookie, he averaged taking 4 sacks a game. But then in the 2 games they played the Vikings, both of which the Vikings won, he would just he turned into Houdini, and he would slip, slide, and move around, and he would slip out of things, and it's frustrating to watch. But it's one of the weird things happen in the division. It kind of just is what it is. Hopefully that's not the case for the next 15 years, but in a small sample size thus far in Caleb's young career, for whatever reason, against the Vikings, he just manages to slip out of things. But the pressure was insane. Absolutely insane. And I have numbers to back this up. The Vikings right now, this is according to Pro Football Reference. If you've listened to the pod before, or if you watch the Football Head show, also on YouTube, check that out. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. There's incongruence with pressure depending on where you're getting your numbers from. But this, according to Pro Football Reference, the Vikings are currently 3rd in the league in pressure percentage at 32.8% of passing reps they get pressure on. They trail only Seattle and Denver. So they're everywhere. Jonathan Grenard is everywhere. Van Ginkel, we all know what Van Ginkel can do. He'll be back. He was practicing today. He did have the red non-contact jersey, so maybe he doesn't play this week, but he will be back. But they're everywhere. Dallas Turner had a nice sack where he had to go all the way around the edge and stuck with it and had his foot on the gas, and he cleaned up a play. The front is very active. It's that for me going into the season, the 2 things I was looking forward to seeing the most were JJ McCarthy as the new quarterback and the defensive front. And the defensive front has lived up to the billing. And to stay with the defense, positive point number 3, red zone defense. They've done an excellent job bowing up in the red zone. Obviously, the Bears had a couple red zone touchdowns in week 1. They had the opening drive touchdown with scripted plays, which thus far, I watched a lot of the Bears-Lions game last week, and once again, Caleb Williams came out. I believe he started 8 for 9 or 8 for 10, and then fell apart after that. So Caleb has very much shown a tendency to, when we're on the scripted plays to start the game, he's on point. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's looking for. He knows where to go with the ball, and he does it. And then once we get out of that, everything kind of falls apart. So if we set that drive to the side, they had the late touchdown, which this is a whole other thing, is teams sort of shifting their approach late in games when they have leads and getting a little more conservative. And Brian Flores is not as bad as most coaches in the league with this. The Ravens are one of the worst teams, which is why the Ravens will Raven, and they have this tendency to just sort of fall apart 3 or 4 times in a season because they just completely shift what they're doing and they get ultra conservative. So that's a whole other issue. But that late touchdown drive, it was more of we have a 2-score lead. If the Bears move the ball, it is what it is. Just bleed clock, force them to take as much time as possible. And they kind of didn't. Cole Kmet had that really nice one-handed catch down the seam. And then Caleb again has the nice escaped act and nearly punches it in. So not an effective drive, but it's in terms of game flow, in terms of the situationals being situational. That's kind of one of those late game team trying to come back down multiple scores where they're throwing everything at it. They're in desperation mode and they're kind of just opening things up and taking more risks. So you're naturally gonna give up a little bit more unless you're, the 2000 Ravens or the 85 Bears or whoever. But beyond that, I mean, the only other touchdown the Bears scored was the pick six. And the only touchdown the Falcons scored, and Kevin O'Connell confirmed this in his press conference, I believe on Monday. It may have been Sunday after the game, but I think it was Monday. Confirmed that they instructed the players to let him score. At that point, they get a touchdown. It's either way, touchdown, field goal. It's going to be a 2-possession game. They're going to need the ball twice. They're going to have to score twice to get back in the game. The clock is more important. Just let them score. So the one touchdown that the Falcons got in that game, the Vikings allowed them to score. Now, maybe they score either way. They were running the ball incredibly well. Bijan was breaking a ton of tackles, which the Vikings are, as I look at this, I believe third in the league in a bad way. They're the third most missed tackles, which again, that is something I want to see play out over the course of the season. Bijan Robinson's Bijan Robinson. So we got to give him some grace with that you're dealing with a guy who has a tendency to create a lot of missed tackles there. But the 5 field goals, they bowed up in the red zone. Even the terrible start to the game where it was a 25-yard run and then a 15-yard run. It's like the game barely starts and they're already in the red zone. When the team gets into the red zone, they bow up and they stop them. And again, we got to see this play out, but thus far, the red zone defense has been fantastic. Point number 4, and the Vikings are 1-1, and the offense could not have been any worse. It's been said a million times across a million publications and a million podcasts, a million TV shows. 7 terrible quarters of offensive football and 1 A+ excellent all-time great quarter. So what that says to me is it has to get better. Whether it's JJ, whether it's Carson Wentz, whether it's Max Brosmer, they just signed Desmond Ridder. God help us if this turns into another one of those seasons where we got to see someone like Desmond Ridder taking snaps, but it's not going to be this bad over the course of the entire season. It's not. It's impossible for it to be that bad. And then on top of that, you look at the weapons. It's not like this is a historically untalented offense that somehow puts together a historically bad offensive performance for 17 straight games. You have Justin Jefferson. You're going to get Jordan Addison back. TJ Hawkinson, there's been a lot of debate there. Josh Oliver, Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones is going to come back. You're going to get healthy on the offensive line, or you're going to get some pieces back at the very least. They're not going to be that bad for 17 games. It's just not possible. I know everyone wants to hit the panic button. I wanted to hit the panic button. I avoided doing a rant cast, as entertaining as it would have been, and I promise you it would have been entertaining, but I avoided doing it because I'm like, you know what? I don't want to put that out there. I don't want to put that out there We're all overreacting to some extent. It's 2 games. We got to just take a deep breath. They're 1-1. They very easily could be 0-2, and they probably, for the way they played, should be 0-2. But the offense, as just god awful as it's been, it's not going to be that bad for 15 more games. It's just not. It's not possible for it to be that bad. And if it is that bad for 17 straight games, then feel free to rail me in the comments. But it's going to get better on offense. Whether you agree with Kevin O'Connell's offensive philosophy or not, whether you think he's one of the top 5 play callers in the league, or you think he's a terrible play caller, there's enough history with KOC coaching this team and calling plays to know, even when it's at its worst, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as it's been. So just pump the brakes. The offense is going to get better. 0.5, and I know we're moving to Carson Wentz, and we'll see how long we have the backup in there, but I talked about this earlier in the week. J.J. McCarthy had one of the most insane weeks that you could possibly have. You make your professional football debut on a Monday night in Chicago, in the town you grew up in, against the team you grew up rooting for. You pull off an insane comeback, which to that point, we should have seen the loss coming. There is a history, specifically with the Vikings, but it's sort of a thing league-wide. When you have one of these crazy emotional wins, it's very hard to come back the next week and just reset everything to normal, especially when it's a short week when you play it on a Monday night. You think about the Minneapolis Miracle. We're sitting there thinking, we're the team of destiny, and they come out the next week and they have one really good drive and they have one really good defensive drive, and then the whole thing fell apart. You think about 2022, that the Buffalo Bills game, how insane that ending was, how emotional that ending was. And they come out the next week and they get smoked by the Cowboys. It's tough to come off of those emotional wins and bounce back and just sort of normalize everything the next week. Again, especially when it's a short week and you're coming off a Monday night game. So he has that for Monday night. Then his fiance gives birth on Wednesday or Thursday, I believe. And then he's got to start his first game at home in front of the home crowd, who's fired up because all the Vikings fans out there, the locals or the people who flew in to see the game, we've been waiting all off season. This whole off season of hype, like you're juiced up to get in the bill, and the fans brought the juice. It was like that first drive, like I said, the 25-yard run, the 15-yard run, the fans in the building prevented that touchdown on that drive. The defense was on its heels, and you had 3 straight plays where you forced a timeout, and then you had 2 procedural penalties in a row because of the crowd. And I think that kind of settled the defense in and got them into that groove to play as well as they did in the red zone throughout the rest of that game. But all of that happening, you're 22 years old. You're making your debut, and within the span of 7 days, you have all of that happen. That is a very singular scenario. It's never going to happen again. J.J. McCarthy is never going to make his professional debut again. He's never going to have the emotions of that. He's never going to make his debut in his hometown again with all his friends and family in the stands to see him play a pro game for the first time. He's never going to make his home debut in Minneapolis ever again. He's never going to have his fiance give birth to his first child ever again. None of those things will ever happen again, much less in the span of 7 days. So again, you got to be a pro. You got to show up to work. You got to do your best. You got to handle your business. It's not making an excuse for him, but he will never be in a position like that again. It is a very singular situation. So moving forward, it's all going to be more routine. It's all going to be more normal whenever he gets back in the saddle, whenever he's back from the high ankle sprain, and the emotions should be more in control. The vibe around everything should be more tempered. So as crazy as that week was, it's the only time he's ever going to have to deal with all that in the span of 7 days. Number 6, The lack of total plays is bound for elasticity. This team has run, I believe, just under 100 total plays in 2 games, which is not a lot. It's bad for the defense because they're out there. The time of possession is incredibly imbalanced. The defense is taking too many snaps. The offense can't get into a rhythm because they're just going 3 and out. In that Bears game, they averaged a 3 and out in the first half, which is crazy. I remember like the last few years, it's like you have 2 3 and outs in a row, and it's like, oh my God, what's happening? They averaged a 3 and out for the entire first half of that game. That in tying into the bounce back of the offense and how it can't get any worse and it has to get better. Like they are going to run more plays throughout the season. Even if they end the season with averaging less plays than they probably should have, or at least relative to how they have in the Kevin O'Connell era, the complete dearth of offensive plays that they've run, it's gonna regress. They're going to run more plays. And that's been a huge problem again because the offense can't get into a rhythm. You think back to last year, they were coming out hot, putting points on the board immediately. They were the best team scoring in the first quarter. The defense then can pin its ears back earlier in the game. They're playing with the lead. They can afford to be more aggressive. They don't have to play on their heels. They don't feel the pressure of like, we need to keep the team in the game. They feel like we can just go hunt because the offense is putting up points. But you're not getting into a rhythm, which is bad for a first time starting quarterback. You want to get them in the rhythm, which the lack of a quick game in the Kevin O'Connell offense is a whole other thing. But this is a positivity podcast. It's not a negativity podcast, it's a positivity podcast. So we're not going to talk about that. But the lack of total plays, it's going to regress somewhere toward the mean, and they're going to be running more than 48 to 50 plays a game on offense on average by the end of the season. Number 7, and I know no one wants to hear this. Up until about an hour ago, I didn't want to hear it. Help is on the way. The team will get healthier in key spots. Darisaw will be back. He better be back this week because we're kind of at that point. Like you got Trey Hendrickson coming off the edge. Do you want Walter Rouse, a third string guy out there blocking Trey Hendrickson? I don't. I assume if you're listening to this and you're not an ironic Packers fan listening to this, you probably don't either. But he will be back. And to me, it's at this point where it's like, I know you're coming off an ACL injury. You want him back to 100%. But I was talking to a friend of mine, and I made the metaphor or the analogy of it's like you look at your phone and it's like, oh shit, my phone's at 2%. I got to plug this in. So you plug your phone in. And you come back every, however long, you check your phone. Okay, now it's at 15%. Now it's at 35%. Now it's at 62%. No, now it's at 83%. Let me swipe down from the top right and put the battery saver on because then it's going to help charge that last 20% even quicker. You come back and check. Your phone's at 95%. You're like, you know what? I don't need that last 5%. I'm just going to unplug this. That's where I'm at with Darisaw. If Darisaw is charged up to about 95%, let's just get him out there. Let's just get him out there. If it's all a mental thing, like he wants to play, but he did admit talking to some beat writers that there's room for improvement. And so I understand, you want the guy, a franchise player. I mean, you look at the effect, like if Trent Williams, when he goes down for the 49ers over the last few years, their record when Trent Williams plays versus when Trent Williams doesn't play, like there's been talk. Brock Purdy obviously missed last week. Debo had injuries before they got rid of him. Ayuk's injured. Juwan Jennings injury. Like Christian McCaffrey. They've had all these various injuries that get more publicity than Trent Williams, but the record when Trent Williams doesn't play versus when he does play is stark. The difference is stark. And Christian Darisaw, I'm not going to put him necessarily exactly on par with Trent Williams, but Christian Darisaw is probably a top 3-4 left tackle in the league. So I get it. You want him to be fully healthy, back from the ACL. You don't want to risk anything. But I feel like at a certain point, it's there may be room for improvement, but it's not like you're not sending him out there at 70% where his leg might snap in half. It's mostly a mental game and then just little bits and pieces here and there in terms of flexibility or just getting the quick twitch muscles firing, stuff like that. But if he's at 95%, unplug that phone and let's get him out there. We need him out there. But Darisaw will be back, and he will be back soon, if not this week. Ryan Kelly will be back. I know he has a history of concussions. He has a long injury history, but he will be back. Darisaw and Kelly will both be back, and we will be back to the full starting five that we were promised in the offseason, where it's like we finally have a kick-ass offensive line that's going to move bodies. We finally have meat in the trenches, and we have yet to see that in full in the regular season, but both of those guys will be back. Van Ginkel will be back. I talked about it. He was practicing today with the non-contact jersey, but AVG, the Gink, the Gangster, he will be back. Harrison Smith will be back. I know there's a lot of pessimists out there. He's too old, but Harrison Smith is vital in terms of getting people in the right spot. He's vital in terms of communication on the field, making sure everyone is on the same page in a very complex defense with a lot of moving parts at any given time. Harrison Smith, he's going to be back out there. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he's going to be out there. Blake Cashman, it's a hamstring. It's a tough injury, but at some point he'll be back. Jordan Addison has one more game on his suspension. And then when they're wheels up to Dublin to go play back-to-back in the UK and Ireland, Addison's playing. He'll be back. And you think about how, he was one of those guys being lauded all through training camp, and you got to take training camp with a grain of salt, but lauded for his play, how good he looked, the chemistry that was developed between him and J.J. McCarthy. And you also have the factor in the man's healthy right now, and he's playing Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson missed pretty much all of camp and preseason. Now, he wasn't going to play in preseason anyway, but he missed pretty much all of camp. It's going to take some time to knock some of the rust off, and unfortunately that has to occur during the regular season with all these offensive line injuries while you're breaking in a new quarterback. Now the new quarterback's injured, so a backup's coming in. Reinforcements are on the way, and that brings me to point number 8, which is teams that get healthier later in the year can get hot. You look at the Rams last year, they started 1-3, 1-4 maybe, and they were within a couple inches on a Matt Stafford pass in the snow from knocking off the Eagles, going to the championship game, possibly going to the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not saying, because we have a very tough schedule, and it only gets tougher. You come out of that bye, you got Philly, you got the Chargers on the road, you got Detroit, you got the Ravens, you got a Packers game coming up shortly after that. It is a murderer's row. It is a gauntlet that they will have to find ways to win some of those games if they want to make it to the playoffs. But on paper, we know how talented the team is. It was a top 5 defense last year, and theoretically, they sacrificed a little bit of run defense for a lot of interior pass rush. You have Justin Jefferson. You have Jordan Addison. You got significantly better on the offensive line. If the pieces all line up, if we got to deal with the crap right now to get healthy by midseason, to then get into a groove, to go on a run, teams say it all the time. I may have a tongue in my cheek as I say it, but it's serious. Don't let them get healthy, and don't let them get hot. Because that's all you need is to go in healthy and hot into the playoffs. I don't care what your record is. I think most Vikings fans at this point, it's like, okay, can we just win a playoff game? If they can get healthy, if this doesn't turn into one of those seasons where, they get Darisaw and Kelly back, but now Donovan Jackson's down, and now Will Fries is down, and now Brian O'Neill's down, or Addison comes back and then Jefferson goes down, or Addison comes back and because he hasn't practiced in a few weeks, he pulls a hamstring, or Jordan Mason gets hurt and now our backfield is Cam Akers and Xavier Scott, or Van Ginkel comes back and now Grenard gets hurt. If it's not one of those years, because we're like, it's not like any of these guys are out for the season. Darisaw is on his way back. Kelly is on his way back. Van Ginkel, Harrison Smith on his way back. Jordan Addison, we know when Jordan Addison is coming back. Cashman, it's a little more open-ended with the hamstring, but they're coming back. They're coming back. We don't play guys in the preseason. And the thought is, well, you don't want them to get hurt when the games don't mean anything. But there's something to callousing your body in game action that they have to callous their bodies now here in September to start the year. So I think there's as good a chance that the team gets healthy by midseason, and we can see whether it's good enough to make the playoffs or not. Because again, it's a gauntlet schedule. But there's as good of a chance that they get healthy by midseason, and we get a chance to see what this team can be relative to the talent on paper. There's as good a chance of that happening as there is everyone's just going to keep getting hurt, and it's just going to be one of those lost seasons. You got to let it play out. You got to let it play out. Point number 9, we have better depth than we have in years past. Now, the problem is we're being tested at areas where we don't have as much depth. Okuda goes down. Obviously, we only carried 4 corners on the active roster headed into the season because Flores wants to use 3 safeties and 3 edge rushers, and he's just a mad scientist back there mixing things up. But for me, the whole offseason, my biggest concern was if Ryan Kelly gets hurt and Michael Juergens has to play. That's what terrified me the most in terms of depth. I felt like pretty much anywhere else, if a starter goes down, I feel confident. If someone on the defensive line goes down, I feel confident. If one of the edge rushers goes down like Van Ginkel did, we got Dallas Turner. Blake Brandel is a solid backup swing guard, especially if he's in there with Ryan Kelly on one side and Brian O'Neill on the other, or Ryan Kelly on one side and Christian Darisaw on the other. To start the season when he was playing left guard last year and everyone was healthy, he was playing really good ball. So like we have good depth at a lot of these positions. Just the problem is the most critical one is where we got an injury. And now we got to deal with Michael Juergens at center until Ryan Kelly comes back from the concussion. And then quarterback, obviously, you never want to see your starting quarterback go down, especially when your backup is a guy who just got here a few weeks ago. But we've seen Kevin O'Connell work magic with Josh Dobbs. We've seen him coax 400-yard passing days out of Nick Mullins. Just try and have some faith. Point number 10, I touched on this a little bit earlier. The lack of preseason reps in the league, there's some correlation to early season rustiness. I think we all think about the Bengals and how they just haven't played anyone in the preseason and they start 0-2 every single year. And obviously the Vikings have followed a similar plan of not playing people in the preseason, and they came out super hot last year, 5-0, and they were just stoning teams early on. And part of that's the schedule. Part of that is just having vets in the right place. Part of it's luck. But there's some correlation to not playing your guys in preseason and kind of having to feel things out in the first few weeks. So obviously it's been super ugly on offense, feeling things out in the first couple weeks. But some degree of that has to do with the lack of the preseason reps and knocking the rustiness off. By the end of October, and probably by the beginning of October, it's not going to be this ugly. It's not going to be this rusty, which ties into point number 4 about how the offense can't get any worse. It has to get better. It's going to get better, and some degree of that has to do with rustiness from not playing in the preseason. We see this across the league. It's unfortunate. I understand you're weighing 2 things of like you don't want guys to tear their ACLs or their Achilles or break a leg in a meaningless game in August. But if you can get through that healthy, then your guys are ramped up, they're calloused, they're ready to go to hit the ground running to start the season. Two different philosophies. There's some degree of luck that plays into both sides of that, but the rust will get knocked off. They're not going to be playing rusty in November. Even if they're playing bad in November, which I don't think is going to be the case, but if they're playing bad football in November, it's not going to be because of rust. So at the very least, you can understand whatever degree of the bad from these first couple weeks is due to rustiness. It's not going to be there in a couple weeks. Point number 11. Kevin O'Connell, as much as I have just fundamental philosophical differences with the man in terms of his philosophy of offense, I'm not going to say he's a bad play caller. I'm not going to say he's not a good play caller. It's just there's just certain things that's part of his personal philosophy that I just don't agree with. But KOC has habitually gotten more out of less. Again, I go back to 2023, the fumble issues to start the season. Justin Jefferson goes down, misses half the year, then halfway through his period of time not playing, Kirk tears his Achilles. He's out for the rest of the year. Then Dobbs gets yanked and Mullins goes in, and then Jaron Hall has to go in. Again, it was a 7-win team. Didn't make the playoffs. By the end of the year, you're like, just another one of those. Every other year we make the playoffs, and the next year we don't. And everything that goes wrong goes wrong. Everything that could go wrong goes wrong. And maybe that's how this year ends up playing out. But we've seen him get more out of less. It's 2 games with J.J. McCarthy, who's a 22-year-old who, as I said, had the craziest week anyone could imagine having to start his career. And you're on your 3rd string left tackle, your backup center, who's probably the biggest concern in terms of immediate depth for really any position on the team. And you're calling all these long developing pass concepts. We really don't have a quick game. Like we just gotta just relax for a second, let things play out. We've seen Kevin O'Connell turn Sam Darnold into a Pro Bowl quarterback. We've seen him. Josh Dobbs has nationally televised commercials because of what Kevin O'Connell did with him for like 2 games. He ain't getting those backup whatever commercials. What is that? Is that one of the insurance companies? I think whatever they are. Where there's like the Case Keenum commercial. I saw one recently with Tommy DeVito. Whatever that branding is. Which, as an aside, commercials, just get rid of them. They're not effective. You remember the commercial, but half the time you don't remember what it's for. And if you don't remember what it's for, you're not going to buy the product. If you're not going to buy the product, then what's the point of spending millions of dollars on these commercials? It just doesn't make any sense. But anyway, I digress. We've seen Kevin O'Connell habitually get more out of less. For whatever issues I have with certain aspects of his coaching or play calling, you listening to this at home or at the gym or during your commute, wherever you may be listening to this, whatever issues you have with Kevin O'Connell, I know, we all know he gets more out of less than most, and he will get more out of this season, whether it's Carson Wentz for 2 to 4 weeks, J.J. McCarthy when he comes back, God forbid Carson Wentz gets hurt, and we get Maximus Decimus Meridius Brosmer time. He's gonna get something out of it. Just trust the process. The things that we know Kevin O'Connell does really well, he's gonna keep doing those well. There's no reason to believe he just suddenly forgot how to squeeze juice out of some quarterbacks. And last, point number 12, the bigger picture. The talent on the roster. Virtually every single one of these guys is signed through next year. Nobody wants to be thinking about next year. We want to think about this year. We're in the season. Maybe preseason, in the offseason, you're one of those people who's sitting there thinking like, let's just make the playoffs and win a playoff game. Like let's just show we can win a playoff game, and then 2026 is our year to really make a run at the Super Bowl. But once you get into the season, you want to hear that. What you want to hear is we're going to make a run this year. The team looks good this year. The team's hot this year. That's what you want to hear. So I know you don't want to hear this, but think about the bigger picture. We got to give J.J. McCarthy time to develop. I know there's been degrees of hype behind him, and I've been part of it. I pounded the table for J.J. McCarthy before the team even drafted him. I remain very high on the man because of the intangible factors to his game. I'm not even going to say it factor. The intangible things to his game, his mentality, his psychology, his philosophy, the way he goes about life, combined with the fact that he has the requisite physical tools to be a successful quarterback. And he's in a position in terms of the roster around him, the coaching around him, to be successful. But that doesn't mean it's not going to take some time. Not everyone comes in and like Patrick Mahomes and plays one game as a rookie and then throws 50 touchdown passes in their second year with a Hall of Fame head coach in Andy Reid, mind you. But outside of him, Jordan Mason is under contract next year. Aaron Jones is under contract next year. Darisaw, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Brian O'Neill, all under contract next year. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, all under contract next year. Josh Oliver, under contract next year. Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, Jalen Redmond, Levi Drake Rodriguez, Ty Ingram Dawkins. If you're an Elijah Williams stan, all those guys under contract next season. Blake Cashman, under contract next season. Ivan Pace Jr. will be a restricted free agent, which is a very high probability he will be back next year. And if he's not back next year, they drafted Kobe King, who different body type, slightly different skill set, but ultimately a guy who is there to be a downhill thumper to help stop the run, which is primarily what Pace is there for, that and blitzing. But in all likelihood, Ivan Pace will be back next year unless someone decides to throw a bag at him, which I'm not sure. It's a devalued position at linebacker. And then on top of that, he's not great in pass defense. So I don't know why anyone would throw a bag at him. Josh Metellus under contract next year. Theo Jackson under contract next year. Jay Ward under contract next year. Byron Murphy Jr., Isaiah Rodgers. All these guys are under contract next year. Harrison Smith could retire. But need I remind you what happens when an all-time great, beloved Minnesota Vikings defender who chooses not to go elsewhere, but to spend his entire career here, whenever he retires, it feels like the next year the Vikings go to the conference title game. I'm thinking about Chad Greenway retiring after 2016, and then they go to the conference title game in 2017. But the pieces that we were on, the reason we were so excited about this team, the talent on paper, they're all going to be here next year. Now, you may end up in a situation where it's like, all right, we got to cut Jonathan Allen or Javon Hargrave to free up some cap because they got cap issues next year. But then you look at the depth behind them. Are you super worried about that? Are you? If Smith retires, he comes off the books. There's a situation where maybe they move on from Ryan Kelly, and then we need a center. And it probably ain't Michael Jergens. So we'll see how that pans out. But with restructures and things of that nature, they have everyone under contract for next season. And they can maintain that. So if this season isn't exactly what we want it to be, that they don't make the playoffs, that they don't win a playoff game, unless it is a complete and total abject disaster, which how often do the Vikings have disaster seasons? Not often. It's pretty rare, to be completely honest. and certainly not with a head coach that you would put at Kevin O'Connell's level. Just we're 2 games into the season. It hasn't looked great. But we have all these reasons to remain, to some degree, cautiously optimistic. And the last and biggest reason is just seeing the bigger picture. The bigger picture is not, we need to win a Super Bowl this year. This is not the '09 Vikings where it's like the wheels are going to fall off if they don't win the Super Bowl this year. It's not, all of our quarterbacks are free agents and we might go pay Kirk Cousins and then start to strip away some of the aging defensive pieces like it was 2017 going into 2018. We got next year. And if the pattern continues, unfortunately, because it means we would have to suffer through another one of these oddball, bizarre, every other years where just everything seems to go wrong. The flip side of that is the year after, everything goes right. And maybe that's 2026. So the sky's not falling, at least not yet. Try and look on the bright side. I know a lot of you don't want to hear the positivity pod here today, but there's reasons to be optimistic. There's reasons, if not to be optimistic, there's reasons to not just want to blow your brains out, which is tough because being a Vikings fan often entails fighting the urge to jump off a bridge. But hopefully these 12 reasons, at least a few of them resonate with you and they'll figure it out. They're going to figure it out. One of these days, they're going to win a Super Bowl. Just got to hang on. Just got to hang on until that day happens. And until that happens, until next time, Skol Vikes.